Ian Stevenson is a Canadian-American biochemist, professor of psychiatry at the University of Virginia, and a doctor of medicine. He studied the phenomenon of reincarnation. He traveled the world for 40 years and examined 3,000 cases of children's memories of past lives. Children who were Stevenson's patients said that their parents and close relatives had previously been completely different people. In a number of cases, it was possible to establish the identities of these people, which was confirmed by the details of their previous lives mentioned by the children. Earlier, we published an article describing the story of one boy who remembered his past incarnation. Today we will tell you a few more illustrative stories proving that reincarnation is real. Some of the stories are taken from Dr. Ian Stevenson's book, Where Reincarnation and Biology Intersect, published in 1997, in which he collected many years of experience from his research. So let's get to know some of them. So, the first story. In the 70s of the 20th century, a sensation flew around the world. 12-year-old Elena Marquardt from West Berlin, having come to her senses after a serious injury, suddenly began to speak impeccable Italian, which she did not know before. At the same time, the girl claimed that her name was Rosetta Castellani. She was from Italy and was born in 1887. When the girl was taken to the address she had given, the door was opened by the daughter of Rosetta, who died in 1917. 12-year-old Elena recognized her and exclaimed, "Here is my daughter Franca." And now, the second story. It happened in Turkey. Local gangster Kemal tried to escape from the police, but realized that this time he was caught. He was surrounded from all sides by armed Turkish police. The last hope was the dormer window that looked out onto the roof, but, carefully looking out, he saw the tops of uniform boots very close. It was the end. Then Kemal slowly put the barrel of the pistol to his chin and, having read the last prayer of his life, pulled the trigger. If he had lived a little longer, he would have been able to take part in the celebration of the birth of a son in the family of his relatives, the Farises. Especially since the baby was named Kemal in his honor. And it was no coincidence, the new father saw Hayek in a dream the night before the birth of the child, who came to visit them. The baby's parents considered this dream a sign. In their opinion, it meant that Hayek would be reborn in their firstborn. The parents, to their surprise, found confirmation of their assumption immediately after the baby was born. 2 marks were clearly visible on his body, one on his neck under his chin, very similar to a scar from a bullet entry wound, and the other on the crown of his head, in the very place where the bullet from Hayek's pistol, having pierced his skull, flew out. But the parents of young Kemal were even more amazed when he began to speak. The baby described in detail the life and circumstances of Hayek's death. He also immediately disliked the security forces, and often threw pebbles in the direction of police officers and soldiers. All these oddities become completely understandable if we assume that Hayek's soul really did enter the child's body. In the process of studying reincarnation, Professor Stevenson repeatedly noticed that birthmarks and even scars were found on the bodies of newborn children at the site of wounds they received in a past life. Several times the professor managed to trace the history of successive incarnations of the same person, or rather, her soul, and to be convinced of the regularity of the appearance of the mentioned marks on the body of infants and, as a consequence, proof of the existence of the phenomenon of reincarnation. In our third story, we will move to India. Ravi Shankar was born in the city of Kannauj, in the state of Uttar Pradesh, in 1951. From an early age, he claimed that his father was actually a man named Jadeshwar, a barber who lived in the neighboring block. He also claimed that he was killed. His real father did not take this childish babble seriously and was offended when he heard such statements from his own son. And he even began to punish the boy in order to discourage him from such fantasies. As he grew older, Ravi's confidence in his previous incarnation grew. Moreover, there was, as he believed, irrefutable evidence of his rightness. On his neck, under his chin, Ravi had a strange birthmark, a sinuous shape, about 5 centimeters long, resembling a knife wound. It was eventually established that on July 19, 1951, 6 months before Ravi was born, the young son of Jadeshwar Prasad, a local barber, was murdered and beheaded. The murder was committed by two of Prasad's relatives. They wanted to take over his property and thus get rid of a competitor in the person of his son. When Jadeshwar Prasad learned of Ravi's strange statements, he decided to visit the Shankar family to hear everything from him. They had a long conversation, during which Ravi recognized Jadeshwar as his former father. He also told him details of his murder that were known only to Jadeshwar and the police. Shocked, Jadeshwar was forced to admit that he had no reason not to believe Ravi's story and that, apparently, the soul of his late son really had entered this young man. And the fourth story takes us to the USA. It happens that a person is able to foresee in which of his relatives he will be reborn after his death. This is confirmed, for example, by the story of William George Jr., born in Alaska in 1950. His mother gave birth to him under anesthesia, and during the birth she had a dream that reincarnation researchers would classify as prophetic. Her late father-in-law, William George Sr., who had recently died in a boat accident, appeared to her. One day he told his son and daughter-in-law that if all these discussions about reincarnation have any basis, then after death he will definitely be reborn in one of his descendants. And at the same time he predicted that the two marks he had, on his left shoulder and on his arm, will definitely end up in the same places on the body of his descendant. William George Sr. died a few weeks after that conversation. And when William George Jr. was born 9 months later, everyone saw two spots on his body. Moreover, in the same places where they were on his grandfather. Sometimes a pregnant woman sees the soul of a newborn in a previous body in a dream. And the identification mark confirming such continuity is often the shape and location of a birthmark on the baby's body. The fifth story happened again in India. Hanumant Saxena was born in a local village in 1955. Shortly before his conception, his mother saw in a dream a man named Maharam, a resident of the same village who had been shot several weeks earlier. Hanumant was born with a large mark on his chest, in the same place where there was a gunshot wound on Maharam's body. Having barely learned to speak, Hanumant said that he was Maharam, and later he described with amazing accuracy people and places that were known to the deceased. And it was there, in India, that Stevenson heard and wrote down the sixth story. The daughter of a Bengali railway worker, a little girl named Shukla played with her pillow as if it were a doll, and called it Minu. Shukla was asked, "Why do you call your pillow that?" She replied, "That is the name of my daughter." The girl's mother asked again, "What daughter? You are still little yourself. What kind of daughter can you have?" And Shukla replied, "In my past life I had a daughter," and began to talk about how she lived in the city of Bombampur, describing her relatives, what her husband's name was, etc. The girl described everything in detail, and the relatives decided to test her words. They went to this city and found out that a woman had indeed died there several years ago, leaving behind a young daughter named Minu. Then they decided to conduct a full experiment, to bring Shukla to the city. Being there for the first time, she confidently led everyone to the house where she had lived before. She unmistakably recognized her husband, his brother and, of course, her daughter. Now the daughter was older than herself. She also showed where in their house there was a box with family jewels and many other details. And finally, the seventh story of reincarnation, recorded by Stevenson. One day he learned about a boy named Imad Elawar, who remembered his past life. The boy lived in a small Lebanese village in the Druze area, a religious sect in the mountainous regions of Lebanon and Syria. Although the Druze community is a branch of Islam, they accept reincarnation, unlike traditional followers. The Druze community has many cases of memories of past lives. Little Imad was not yet 2 years old, and he already began to talk about his past life. He spent his previous life in a village called Ribi. This village was also a Druze settlement, where, according to him, he was a member of the Bohamzi family. More than once, The boy asked his parents to take him there, but his father did not take his words seriously, believing that he was just fantasizing. Imad gave several facts about his previous incarnation. He talked about how he loved a girl named Jamila, about how he went hunting with his dog. He had a double-barreled shotgun and a rifle. Since he did not have permission to keep them, he had to hide them. Imad also described that he had a small yellow car, which he liked to drive. He mentioned that he witnessed a traffic accident in which his cousin died. Some time later, an investigation was conducted, in which his story was confirmed. In the spring of 1964, Dr. Stevenson made his first trip to this mountainous region to talk to young Imad, who was 5 years old at the time. Before visiting the village of Ribi, Imad gave 47 facts about his past life. And Dr. Stevenson was going to personally verify the veracity of each. He decided to take Imad to this village as soon as possible. The distance to the place was about 20 miles. The road was winding. It was rarely traveled. Upon arrival in the village, Imad made 16 more statements on the spot. 14 of them were reliable, and 12 were very personal, so it is highly unlikely that this information could have been obtained from any source other than the family. Although Imad never remembered his former name, it turned out that the Buhamsi family had one son named Ibrahim, who died of tuberculosis in 1949. He had a cousin who died in 1943 as a result of a traffic accident. Ibrahim also loved a beautiful woman named Jamila, who left the village after his death. While in the village, Imad remembered many details of his former life in the Buhamsi family. He correctly showed the place where he kept the dog. He also indicated where he hid his guns, where the bed was and what the bed looked like. In addition to the fact that Imad accurately described Ibrahim's usual life, he also easily recognized his sister Huda and called her by name. In the photograph, he recognized his brother without a single hint and remembered his name, Fuad. The dialogue that took place with his sister Huda was convincing. She asked Imad, "You said something before you died. What was it?" Imad answered, "Huda, call Fuad." This was indeed so. Fuad had left shortly before, and Ibrahim wanted to see him again, but died almost immediately. If there was no secret conspiracy between the young Imad and the elderly Huda, then this seems impossible. It is difficult to imagine any other way in which Imad could have learned about the last words of the dying man. There is only one conclusion: Imad was indeed the incarnation of the late Ibrahim Buhamsi. No, I am in no way calling you to believe in reincarnation, but you must agree that if the trend is constant, then the phenomenon of reincarnation, that is, the transmigration of souls, does exist. If you wish, write in the comments what you think about it. And see you on our channel.